People of Earth, my name is Colin, your name is Audience, and welcome back to this. I have a really cool plan, not really cool, but I have an actual idea that I want to do for this week's vlog. And yes, I did just come up with it right now, but what we're going to talk about essentially is personality types, personality tests. It's one that I did a very long time ago, and to be honest, one of the things I've talked about with a couple people recently is we kind of jokingly talk about astrology a lot of the times. We're like, oh, classic, whatever. Like that's a big thing, at least in the culture right now, in global culture. Maybe it's just the people in my age group or whatever you want to call it. A lot of people talking about astrology, and it's really interesting to me to go in from a skeptic standpoint and like read all about that stuff and see that really a lot of the time what I found, I'm an Aries, first of all, let's get that out there, is it's sometimes, from what I can gather, at least in my experience, it's 50% correct and 50% nonsense. Which is, granted, a lot more than it should be. If we're being completely honest about it, 50% is a ridiculously high percentage for it to get to for it to just be when you're born. Like that's kind of crazy, and that's what maybe tips the scales a little bit to me being like, well, maybe it is a thing. I'm not going to say I fully believe it, but 50% is an insane amount for it to be working. Like 50% of the time it's working, that's more than it should, if that makes sense. Logically speaking, that feels like more than it should. If it was working 13% of the time, everyone would be like, yeah, that's the correct. But the fact that it's 50% of the time, at least in my experience, is kind of crazy. I know there's people out there who it works 100% of the time. Astrology, if you look at an astrology reading or whatever, again, I'm not an expert, so I don't know what's out there. But if you're looking, some people, when they look at that, it's like they're looking in a mirror. And so I kind of had an experience similar to that, not with astrology, but with this personality test, and we're going to take a look at it in just a second here. So this is a website, 16 Personalities. This is, I believe, a site that was recommended as part of a college course for me. And I took it, and then I, didn't think anything of it, and then I went back and read it, and it was like, holy, crap, what people feel about astrology, like they're looking in a mirror. I talked about astrology being 50% correct. This is at least for me, 85, which is, again, insane for something that has very little. I mean, again, I took a test. This is a test that you answer questions on. So it's crazy to me that it was this accurate. And I'm not going to say that it's 100% accurate and that, if you read through this description and then met me, you'd be able to control every action. You'd be able to manipulate me because you know exactly. That's not how personality types work. It's all about kind of tendencies, from my understanding. It's all about what you are prone to doing, what your habits look like, just things that everybody's going to be different within their personality, but it's more so kind of your set of values, essentially, and that can change from time to time. That shifts over time, but it's just fascinating. So the results of my test were that I am a mediator, or an INFP, as it says right there. What the just baseline description on this site is poetic, kind, altruistic people, always eager to help a good cause. That, by itself, at least to my ears, isn't accurate. Not that I'm not eager to help good causes, or altruistic, or poetic, or kind. If I was tasked with giving myself, what is that, 1, 2, 3, 4 descriptors, those probably aren't the ones that I would choose. But again, that's how people are different within the personality. And we're going to talk about strengths and weaknesses real quick, because that's just perfectly right here. Empathetic. Definitely would describe myself as empathetic. Whether it shows physically, in body language or not, I like to think I am pretty good at recognizing how people are feeling. And understanding why they are feeling that way. In terms of, and this is going to be a lot of me tooting my own horn, because a lot of these strengths are things that I, again, consider really important to being a functioning human and being a good person. So it's not me being egotistical, it's just me being the personality type that it's telling me I am. And so clearly, if these are the strengths that I have, I'm going to recognize those as strengths that I want to have, if that makes sense. Generous, I would say this is true a lot of the time. I'm willing to give, to those less fortunate or those who don't have. It's especially when I'm okay on my own. Like if I was really struggling, then obviously, yeah, it's really difficult to be generous. Moving on, open-minded, pretty straightforward. Tolerant is tough because to me, tolerant, the connotation of that, at least in my mind, is like quiet, almost. Maybe that's wrong, but tolerant to me is like quiet, and I would never describe myself as quiet, as I'm sure all of you are aware. But open-minded, yeah, I would say that I have, a set of core values, or I have a set of things that I value, and I recognize as those are like my truths, or like those are the things that I care about and believe. But I'm very slow, or I'm not super quick to like put other people's beliefs down or be like, no, you're absolutely wrong about that. Obviously, it depends on what we're talking about. If it's a belief that coming back to the empathy thing, if it's a belief that's going to hurt other people, then yeah, I'm going to shoot it down. I'm going to be pretty harsh on that. But typically, I am very open-minded when it comes to like hearing other people's opinions about things, especially when it comes to the next thing, which is creative. Obviously, I work in a creative field a lot of the time, so maybe it's difficult for people to understand that sports broadcasting is a creative field, but it really is. There's art technically, because you're creating graphics and stuff. There is an amount of creativity in how you're going to switch a show, because based on how you switch a show, it's going to make people feel different ways. It's going to tell a story differently, essentially. It's literally cutting between different perspectives of an event. If you're showing different perspectives of something, that's you creating the truth, or like creating the story of what happened. If you show everything from one perspective, then you're not going to see things from the other perspectives, and you're not going to see things that they might see, which changes the story a little bit. Again, kind of sidetracked, but that made sense, right? I am cutting between different camera angles, and therefore I am showing different things. If I only showed one camera angle the entire time, you'd miss a lot of stuff. You'd miss a lot of key details, emotions, etc., etc., etc. Passionate. This one is a strong one because passionate can both mean like you care a lot about things, but also that you care a lot about things, which is very, very much my personality. If you get me started on something that I'm passionate about, again, this kind of comes back to the open-minded thing, where they sometimes battle, where it's, yeah, I'm open-minded about things, but also if you get me going on something, I'm gonna go. And then finally, idealistic. This one's really great. I want to read this real quick. INFP personalities strive to follow their conscience, even when doing the right thing isn't easy or convenient. They rarely lose sight of their desire to live a meaningful, purpose-filled life, one that helps others and leaves the world a better place. I think this is something that is certainly difficult, but I think is true. I think the majority of the time, I am looking to make the morally correct decision, and I do have a pretty strong conscience when it comes to things, of acknowledging that, oh, this is something that could really help this person, or this is something that could really, really hurt somebody, and obviously avoiding that. Now, obviously, the more interesting side of things, we'll go down to the weaknesses. Unrealistic. That's a tough one. This is a tough one to get started on. Nothing is perfect, and that can be difficult for INFPs to accept. Very true. People with this personality type can be hopeless romantics, check. With rose-colored visions of what their lives should be like, check. This can set them up for disappointment when reality inevitably falls short of their dreams, check. Tough pull for all the INFPs out there. But it's unfortunately very true. I have, I don't know if dreamer is the right word. But I do have a very powerful imagination that is centered around what I think a successful, or like what a life should be, and that comes back to kind of like idealistic, of like the things that I think are important, and organizing those into what makes a life meaningful and then we come to unrealistic. And yeah, a lot of the time it's going to be hard to meet all of those ideals. Self-isolating. Long to connect with others, but they don't always know how, especially in new environments. They may be reluctant to put themselves out there in ways that would help them make new friends or become involved in a new community. As a result, people with this personality type may sometimes feel lonely or isolated. This is very true, specifically that first part. Moving on, unfocused. You've seen the vlogs. I don't know why we're even questioning. Like, do I need to explain? You know. We're moving on. Emotionally vulnerable. Emotional attunement of these personalities is their greatest strengths, but unless they establish boundaries, they can be at risk of absorbing other people's negative moods or attitudes, and this can be detrimental to their personal peace and productivity. Yeah, I would say that's pretty accurate. I would say I'm a little stronger than this implies when it comes to absorbing other people's emotions. I think I'm, again, good at recognizing and, like they say, attuned to emotions, but I think I have a little bit more resistance and maybe a little bit thicker of a skin when it comes to other people's negative moods affecting me. Too eager to please. Conflict tends to be stressful for us. Yes, it does. Don't like conflict. Would like everything to just magically happen. And that's not... It's not so much either. I wouldn't even narrow it all the way down to conflict either. I would say for me specifically, any type of confrontation doesn't have to be like a huge confrontation, like you're sleeping with my wife. No, it's like stuff like, hey, you said you were gonna pay me last week, and I still haven't got the paycheck. Like that's a confrontation still. Maybe it's not. I don't know. And maybe me viewing it as a confrontation is the problem. But yeah, hate conflict of any kind. When someone dislikes or disapproves of them, these personalities may become fixated on trying to clear the air and change that person's mind. If you don't like me, I'll recognize that, and I recognize that I have a big personality a lot of the time, especially with people that I feel comfortable around. But prime example is some stuff that happened in college where I knew somebody didn't like me. I did not go out of my way to try and change their mind about it. I just said, hey, we don't like each other. I didn't say this to them, but I was like, recognize we don't like each other, so what's the point in pretending, you know? Like, be civil, obviously. Those are two different things. Being civil and just not engaging are two very different things. Like, if we don't like each other, we don't have to pretend that we like each other, but for the sake of everybody and for the vibes and for the experience, let's just chillax, you know? Self-critical. Believe in their unique potential, and they desperately want to live up to it, but it can cause them to have unrealistic expectations for themselves. Again, we're really going hard in the paint on this unrealistic, imaginative stuff, and unfortunately that is like a very true part of my personality, is I'm constantly getting way ahead of myself when it comes to just kind of everything, of like, and then this could happen, 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 and then it just doesn't. Hopefully you enjoyed me going over kind of my personality, because again, like I said at the beginning, this is like spot on. And from reading through all of this, it is like scary how accurate it is, because every single one of these things that you read, one of these traits, I read it and I go, yeah, and I can visualize in my head when that trait has appeared, or when it has been used, or when it's been present. And that's crazy because, like I said, astrology 50% of the time. This is 85% accurate. I think there's probably, again, like I said, 15% of it that's like, well, not really, because it's my own flavor of the INFP. But yeah, spot on, which is scary. So hopefully you learned something. Hopefully you will go take the 16 personalities quiz. I'm pretty sure it's free. And hopefully it will be as accurate for you as it was accurate for me. And if not, let me know in the comments. So that's going to do it for this episode of the vlog. Thank you all for watching, and I will catch all of you next week. But if I don't, have a good one. Peace.